الله الرحمن الرحيم. Is this working? الحمد لله رب العالمين. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم يسر لنا أمورنا يا رب العالمين. اللهم اقبلنا عندك يا أرحم الراحمين. يا رب اقبلنا عندك يا أرحم الراحمين. يا رب اقبلنا عندك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سلام الله عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. First, for all those that I missed, I want to say Eid Mubarak. Everyone to be khair, and I hope that inshallah everyone had a very spiritually fruitful Eid. And you know, and the Khatib should have reminded you what this Eid was about. What was this Eid about, ultimately? The sacrifice of whom? Animal. He went to the farm for the first time. Sacrifice of whom? Ibrahim alayhi salam. What's Ibrahim alayhi salam's relationship to Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam? His great-grandfather. Remember, Ibrahim, who was his son? This is not our father's same place. We have another man.
I'm good.
It's okay?
No, I'm good.
All right, go together. Sayyidina Ibrahim had two sons, two children. Okay, you know what I'll do? I will carry it. No problem.
Sorry.
He had two children. Okay, I will carry both of them. Wires all across my body. Is this better? Okay. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he had two children. He had Ismail. And Ismail was the son of whom? His wife, Hajar. And he had Ishaq. Ishaq was the son of Sarah. So from the lineage of whom is Yusuf? Is he from Ismail or is he from Ishaq? Ishaq. And who was Ishaq's son? Yaqub alayhi salam. Jacob. And Jacob's son is Yusuf alayhi salam. And this is the Eid of Ibrahim alayhi salam, where he made the ultimate sacrifice. And you know how much love Ibrahim had for Ismail. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him to sacrifice Ismail. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was putting Ibrahim through a test that as a parent I'll tell you is unthinkable. And Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he put that knife to Ismail, he turned him to the side, just like you would turn an animal to the side, and he brings the knife to Ismail. He planned on slaughtering his son. He wasn't waiting for revelation. And when Ibrahim asked his son Ismail, what do you think? He told him the dream, right? You know. What did Ismail say to his father? He said, Ya abati, if'al ma tu'mar. Satajiduni insha'Allah min as-sabirin. He said, oh my father, do what Allah is commanding you. You will find me, insha'Allah, from those who are patient. And so Ibrahim, he takes his son Ismail, and he brings the knife close by, and then what happens? The revelation comes. But in reality, what was God doing to Ibrahim? What was he slaughtering though? What is he really slaughtering inside Ibrahim? His patience? He's slaughtering the worldly life. He's removing the dunya from the heart of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And what is he filling the heart of Ibrahim with? Love of Allah. Which ultimately is the love of God. He's taking every connection that Ibrahim has in the dunya. And one of the greatest connections in the dunya is your children. And he's removing it from Ibrahim's heart. It's a slaughter. And he's putting in that heart instead, Allah Rabbul Izzah. And here is Ibrahim alayhi salam's grandson, Yaqub. Who does Yaqub love? How much does he love Yusuf? An immense amount. And what is Yaqub being tested by? Same like Ibrahim, his son. The thing of the dunya that he loves the most, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing him. And that's the sacrifice. And this is the sacrifice of the prophets. Remember, the Prophet sallallahu the Messenger of God, Muhammad alayhi salam, and one day he was staring at Al-Hasan al-Hussein, and he was watching them play. And he says, "Oh Muhammad, as to one of them, he will be poisoned and killed. As to the other one, he will be slaughtered." He's reminding the Prophet of God that the love in the heart, it's okay to love, but ultimately, what do you love for? You love for Allah. Would you say love is a good thing? Yes, love is a good thing. But love can also cause a lot of harm, right? The 10 brothers, they loved Ya'qub. But look at what their love of Ya'qub did. Caused a lot of harm. Zulaykha, did she love Yusuf? She did. But that love, if it's not put in the proper channel, causes a lot of harm. And Yusuf alayhi salam, we said he's constantly in love with Allah. So you see how he's bearing the test one after the other. And when we stopped last time, who remembers where we stopped?
The dream. The dream.
Basically, he was given the position, he was in jail, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removed him from jail. And I want to go over these ayat of Zulaykha. Now, Zulaykha admits that she was the one who tried to seduce Yusuf alayhi salam. And she says something very interesting. She says, "Inna nafs la'ammaratun bisu," that my nafs, my soul, commanded me to do evil. Now, in the Quranic text, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about 3 types of souls. One of them is a nafs al-ammara, the one that Zulaykha is speaking about here. The nafs, the soul that encourages a person to do evil. There are some people that you meet, no matter what, they're always trying to do something wicked. There's always a desire inside their heart that any situation that's around them, let's see if we can twist it for harm. There's a nafs inside humanity that's like that. Allah also talks about in the Quran about a different types of nafs. He says, "La uqsimu biyawm al-qiyamah wa la uqsimu bi nafs al-lawwama." So we have nafs al-ammara, what Zulaykha is talking about here, the soul that is desiring a person to do harm. Then there's a nafs al-lawwama. The nafs al-lawwama is between the nafs al-ammara and a different nafs. What's the other nafs? Nafs al-mutma'inna, the tranquil soul. The soul that's constantly in obedience to Allah. What does Allah tell this soul? ارجع إلى راضية مرضية. This soul is the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. Allah is pleased with, and that soul will be pleased with Allah Azza wa Jalla. It's the soul that always wants to do good. And there's some individuals, subhanAllah, you'll meet them, no matter what the situation is, they're always looking for good. They're looking for a good deed to do. They're looking for a good excuse for their brother or sister who's committed something that you and I would say is questionable. Then there's the one that we said that's in the middle, and nafs al-lawwama. That's in the middle. And that's where most of humanity falls. Now Zulaykha says, "Inna nafs al-ammaratun bisu," that my nafs al-ammara caused me to do some harm. She's admitting that it came from her. Now, the commentators of Al-Quran Al-Kareem, they narrate that Zulaykha was forgiven, number 1. Number 2, there are many narrations that she ends up marrying Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. Now remember, he stayed in the jail for 7 years. When she tried to seduce him, Yusuf alayhi salam was around the age of 33. Zulaykha was much older than him. And the narrations tell us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave her, and that Yusuf alayhi salam made a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring back her youth and her beauty. And subhanallah, Allah did. He reversed time for Zulaykha, brought back her beauty, and Yusuf alayhi salam married her, and he had children from Zulaykha. So according to most of the commentators at this point, Yusuf alayhi salam marries Zulaykha. She desired him in harm. She desired him in haram, but what did Allah give her in halal? He gave her Yusuf alayhi salam. if she was patient and she waited, the same desire that she wanted in haram, Allah had written for her in halal. But sometimes we have to go through difficulties to realize this. And Allah forgives her. Now, the king of Egypt makes Sayyidina Yusuf the finance minister, we said. Because Yusuf knew the dream of the king. He said, you're going to have 7 years of good crops, and then 7 very difficult years. So when he asked Yusuf, what would you like? Yusuf said, make me the one who's in charge of the crops. Now Yusuf knew what was going to happen. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings us directly into the next verses, where he says, قَالَ اجْعَلْنِي عَلَى خَزَائِنِ الْأَرْضِ إِنِّي حَفِيظٌ عَلِيمٌ. Appoint me over the storehouses of the land. Indeed, I am a knowing guardian. وَكَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And this we established Joseph in the land to settle therein. We touch with our mercy whom we will, and we do not allow to be lost the reward of those who do good. Now something very interesting happens. These 7 years go on. And in Egypt, they're getting all the crops. Then the 7 difficult years come. Now that time of difficulty, those 7 years, was not just limited to Egypt. It spread throughout the whole land. Where was Yaqub and his sons living? In the Palestine area. They went through a great drought and a great time of starvation. They weren't getting any crops. But they heard that Egypt had the crops. So what did the 10 brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam do? They headed to Egypt. You see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He has a plan, His plan is set forth. And no matter what you and I try to do to stop that plan or hurry that plan, we can't. Yusuf alayhi salam was in a well. His brothers tried to kill him. Now where is he? He's in Egypt as a financial minister. And who's coming to seek aid from him, though they don't know it's him? His brothers. Wallahu ghalibun ala amrih. Remember we said that this ayah, this verse, is the summation of Surah Yusuf alayhi salam, that Allah's will be done. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to say here in this ayah, A'udhu billah. وجاء إخوة يوسف فدخلوا عليه فعرفهم وهم له منكرون. And the brothers of Joseph came seeking food, and they entered upon him, and he recognized them, but they did not recognize him. What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell Yusuf alayhi salam in the well? You guys remember? Who remembers what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Yusuf? لَتُنَبِّئَنَّهُمْ بِأَمْرِهِمْ هَذَا وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. Remember the well? Allah sends Jibreel alayhi salam telling Yusuf, "O Joseph, you one day will recount this story to your brothers, and they will not recognize who you are." Now here they are, they're coming into town, they're coming into the palace of Yusuf alayhi salam. Yusuf recognizes them. They don't recognize Yusuf alayhi salam. And the commentators of the Quran al-Kareem, they say that Yusuf alayhi salam was wearing a beautiful crown. He was dressed in the clothing of the Egyptians, made of silk, which was not haram for them, wearing the jewelry of the Egyptians. And his brothers came in, not recognizing who he was. Now they're coming begging for food. They're coming with things from Palestine, trying to barter for grains. So Yusuf alayhi salam, being the owner of the storehouses, he would sit with every individual that came. He would see what they had, they would give him, and he would give them grains. Now his 10 brothers come in. Yusuf alayhi salam sees them. They're sitting down in front of him. What do you think was going through his heart? Is he happy to see them? and you had in front of you someone that afflicted you with this type of terrible harm, and you knew that you could do whatever you wanted to those individuals and get away with it, what would you do? Yeah, Ashkullah, what would you do? You throw them right away. You get those big guards. You'd say, take these 10 guys, put them in the worst dungeon, and I'll get to them in a few minutes. This is Sayyidina Yusuf, and you have to be, he's a prophet of God, but he's also a human being. You can imagine the emotions going through his heart at this moment. He's seeing them in front of him. He has power over them, but Yusuf alayhi salam knows who has power over him. Who has that power? Allah Rabbul Izzah. And we always want the rahmah of Allah. So Yusuf alayhi salam, he holds in his emotions. And you know what he starts to do? He starts to talk to them. Where are you from? Where are you coming from? And the brothers say, oh, we're coming from Palestine. He's saying, how many of you? We're 10. Yusuf alayhi salam starts to give them grains. He says to them, do you have any more brothers? They say, well, we had 2. One of them is in Palestine with our father. The other one, he ran away as a young boy. Now Yusuf alayhi salam, he's sitting there hearing these lies about himself. And he's bearing it patiently. But this is a true story. Wallahi, Faisal, jazakumullah khair for choosing the story of Sayyidina Yusuf, because wallahi, over these past 4 weeks, 5 weeks, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put a connection with my heart in this surah that wasn't there before to this extent. And the more I delve into the story of Yusuf, number one, the more beautiful things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows me. And number two, I have to be honest with you, the more depressed my heart becomes. Because this is a true story. And I see what these brothers did to Yusuf, and he's there, alayhi salam, in this patient form. Oh, our other brother, he ran away. So you know what Yusuf alayhi salam, he tells them, why don't you stay with me tonight? Stay in my house. He orders his servant to set up a room for these 10 brothers of his. And he tells his servant, I want you to go get the finest food. I want you to go get the finest drink. I want you to lay out the finest silk. And I want you to honor them in a way that we've never honored any guest that has entered our home. See how the prophets of God are. The Anbiya, the prophets, Ar-Rusul, the messengers, the awliya, the men of Allah, al-arifin, those who know Allah. We said before, they see humanity for the state that they're in, and they deal with them at softness in that whole state. So Yusuf alayhi salam is seeing his brothers here in front of them. He knows the harm they've caused him, but he says, honor them with a banquet in my house. So they go to his house. They spend the night there, eating fine food, drinking fine drink. And Yusuf alayhi salam, he enters his home, as the narrators tell us, and he overhears a conversation between the brothers. And they say to each other, why do you think that man is being so kind to us? One of them replies, maybe he knows our father. Maybe he knows our father is a prophet of God. Now Yusuf alayhi salam, he's outside the door, he's hearing this, and his son is there, and Yusuf alayhi salam starts crying. And his son, he looks at him, he says, oh father, who are these men? And he says, oh son, these are your uncles. He says, these are your uncles. He says, my son, he said, these are the ones who threw me in a well, and now I'm a wazir. I'm royalty in Egypt. Did they do good to me or did they do harm? What would you answer? Answer out loud. But see, sometimes, my brothers and sisters, we go through life and we see an event that befalls us at that exact moment. And we think that the dunya and everything has fallen on our heads and Allah has forsaken us. But in reality, time goes on, and then what do we realize about what just happened to us that we hated when it happened? We realize that, what, Ashraf? It was the best thing that ever happened to me. The best thing that ever happened to me. I'll tell you a personal story. Wallahi, I think this is true. I was in Mecca in 2000, the year 2000. I'm sorry, 2002. I was with a very special Sheikh, Sheikh Moutasem Atiya. We were in Mecca al-Mukarramah. There was a group of 60 of us doing Umrah during Ramadan. This is a true story. It was time for us to go to Al-Madinah al-Munawwarah. Sheikh Moutasem, because he came a little late, he came from Egypt. He said, Moutasem, look, can you take this group of 60 individuals to Medina, lead them in the ziyarah, teach them what they need to do. I'm going to spend 1 or 2 more days here in Mecca, and I'll catch you in Medina. I said, no problem. I'll do it. Ala aini wa rasi. We get into a van, a big bus, a 60-passenger bus. And when it came in front of us, the bus was old, and it was very scary looking. But we still got it. We started driving to Al-Madinah al-Munawwarah. This is in Ramadan, the last 10 nights of Ramadan. I fell asleep in the back. And a very good friend of mine, his name was Abdul Muqit, he was sitting in the seat right next to me. He fell asleep with his head on my shoulder. We're going along. Next thing I know, I hear a loud sound, and I wake up to find myself flying in air. Wallahi al-Azim, and all those who know me closely, Sajjad, is this true story? Mazhar, is this a true story? Faisal, is this a true story? This is a true story. What had happened was the bus driver fell asleep. He crashed into a rail. The bus started flipping. I came flying, ejected from the bus. I woke up to find myself in air. Now I thought I was dreaming. There was no movement on my behalf. I landed on the ground of the street, but guess what landed on top, below me? The frame of the window. And I slid on that frame across the streets of Saudi Arabia. And I saw this bus flipping. Now, I spent a week in the hospital in Jeddah. I came back to America. Right away, Dr. Coker, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have rahmah on him and make his matters easy for him. He took me right away to Maryland General Hospital. And they checked me in right away in the emergency room. The doctor comes in, he asks me what happened. I told him what happened. He said, can you hold on 1 minute? He goes and he gets 4 other doctors. And he says, can you repeat this story to them? I said, why? He said, we see people coming into the emergency room that get into accidents at 10 miles an hour and their whole bodies are paralyzed. He's like, there was divine grace in your story. Now, one of my friends, when he came to visit me, he said to me, Moutasem, this must have been the worst moment of your life. And to be honest with you, at that time I actually felt that. But in reality now, almost 10 years later, looking back, Wallahi al-Azim, it was the best thing that ever happened to my life. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened for me things that I guarantee you, if I did not go through that trial, if I did not go through that difficulty, would not be open to me now. All by the rahmah of Allah. So there are times that you go through difficulty. You have to bear it. You have to be patient with them. And if you have taqwa of Allah, if you're connected to God, you need to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has some good in store for you. Now Yusuf alayhi salam went through this difficulty, and now he's a king of the kings of Egypt. And his brothers who were trying to kill him are now begging him for food. And this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decree works. In a way, in a method that you and I can't understand. But it's a way, in a method that you and I have to go through to come to the realization that Yusuf alayhi salam came through. So they're sitting there sleeping in his house. He gives them the grain. He gives them everything that they need. He tells them, look, you told me you have one more brother by the name of Benjamin. He said, if you come back with that brother, I'll give you even more grain than you got from me today. Now they're very happy with this. They said, look at the honor that he's giving us. let's go back to our father and get our younger brother and come back and get even more. You see how their minds are working? Right? You see these 10 brothers. Do you have the psychology of these 10 brothers now? Selfish individuals. Selfish individuals. The first chance that they got to talk about Yusuf, to Yusuf, what did they do? They lied. What kind of nafs is that? Nafs al-ammara. Yusuf alayhi salam hearing the lies, what kind of nafs does he show them? Al-mutma'inna. See the beauty of Yusuf alayhi salam? So the story goes, they take the grains and they start traveling back to Palestine. Now something amazing starts happening to them. On the way from Egypt to Palestine, they stop by village to village, and the villagers start showing them extreme kindness. They start feeding them. Every village they went by, somebody says, come, you must stay at my house. Now the eldest brother, he says, this is very strange. He said, we passed by these same villages on the way to Egypt, and no one paid us any mind. They didn't care about us. But now we're coming back from Egypt, from the presence of that king, and everyone is showering us with gifts and showering us with generosity. One of the brothers says to him, he goes, I think I know why. He says, the barakah, the blessings of the presence of that king is rubbing off on us. Now what did the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa ala alihi tell us happens to a person who keeps good company? Remember, he gave us an example of a man who spends time with a man who sells perfume. You know this hadith? Huh? What happens if you spend time with a man who sells perfume day and night? You're going to start smelling good. You're going to start smelling like that man. Are you the perfume seller? No. But his smell rubs off on you. Now what happens if you spend time with an ironsmith, as the Prophet said? If you go into an ironsmith's lab, he's working with fire, what's bound to happen to your clothes from the ashes? It's going to fall on you. So you can have the barakah of the people of Allah just by spending time with them, or you can have the foulness of the people of shaitan if you spend time with them. There was a sahabi by the name of Hanzala. One day he realizes something about himself, and he goes running to Sayyidina Abu Bakr, and he says, Ya Abu Bakr, I'm a hypocrite. Now Sayyidina Abu Bakr says, why is that? Ya Hanzala, why? He says, when I'm around the messenger of God, I'm in a spiritual state that's really high. But when I'm away from him, my spiritual state falls. Now Sayyidina Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu wa ardah, look at the pureness of his heart. He says, if that's your story, I'm going through the same thing. I must be a hypocrite too. So he said, let's go to the messenger of God. So they say, oh messenger of God. They said, when we're with you, our spirituality is up here. But when we go away from you, it starts to fall. And the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa ala alihi smiles. You know what he says to them? He says, if you're able to maintain the state that you are with me, when you're away from me, then the malaika will come and shake your hands. The malaika will come and shake your hands. He goes, but there's a day for this. There's a day for that. But what happened to the Sahaba from spending time with the Prophet of God? They were rubbed off with his barakah. How are they amazing men? Because they spent time with the Messenger of God. Who do you and I spend time with? Don't answer up. You're a beautiful brother, so whoever you spend time with is a very beautiful person. MashaAllah. But in reality, recently I went to Turkey. One of my shuyukh, he told me, Moutasem, travel to Ankara. And I want you to go visit a particular sheikh. His name is Sheikh Muhammad Amin Ir. He's 105 years old. Now, if you've been to Turkey, Ankara is the place you don't want to go to. It's like going to, Sacramento when you're in California. You'd rather be in San Diego. You'd rather be in San Francisco or Los Angeles. Sacramento is just the capital where the state building is. Ankara was the same way. The main city that you want to be in Turkey is what? Istanbul. And anyone who's been there, you see the beauty of Istanbul and you're mesmerized by it. But I took a trip this Ramadan after the Umrah to Turkey to go meet Sheikh Mohammed Amin. And I went to Ankara just with the sole purpose to meet this man. We went to his house initially. His family said he's not home, he's at the masjid. We go to the masjid and he's in i'tikaf. 105-year-old man in i'tikaf. And before giving salams to him, I just said, let me observe him for a little bit. When it came time for prayer, this old man would stand up coming out of i'tikaf, running to be in the first line of prayer. After dhuhr, he completed all the sunan of dhuhr. Before every prayer, I saw him pulling out a miswak and rushing, cleaning the teeth. I said, there's something beautiful about this man. So I went to see him when he was back in his khalwa. And I walk into his room and he's sitting down. He'll be okay, inshallah. That's okay. He's sitting in his room. As soon as I enter, Sheikh Mohammed Amin, who's 105 years old, he stands up and he insists that I sit in his place. And then he sits down and he says to me, starts asking me where I came from. I told him I came from America. He said, did you come with any questions? I said, no, I just came to just be in your presence. So that whole day, I spent around Sheikh Mohammed Amin, sitting next to him, doing whatever he was doing. I rarely asked a single question. My brothers and sisters, wallahi al-azim, I'm saying this in truth. I left him that day. For that week that I was in Istanbul, as I stayed there, I was in a spiritual state that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. I was in a state that I have not been in a very long time in my life. And I knew the barakah of being around Sheikh Mohammed Amin was rubbing off on me. Now, the barakah of who you spend time with will rub off on you. Now, the barakah of Yusuf alayhi salam was rubbing off on his brothers. Even though they came with evil, even though they came with harm, they got the barakah already of Yusuf alayhi salam. Now they're returning to Palestine, and they get to their father. وَلَمَّا جَهَّزَهُمْ بِجِهَازِهِمْ قَالَ ائْتُونِي بِأَخٍ لَكُمْ مِنْ أَبِيكُمْ. So Yusuf alayhi salam, he gives them all these provisions, and he tells them, go back and come with your son, with your brother Benjamin. But he tells them, if you don't come back with him, I won't give you any more grains. Yusuf alayhi salam is setting up a plan here. And they said that they will attempt to dissuade his father from keeping him. Remember, they took Yusuf alayhi salam by force. All 10 of them ganged up upon their father. Now, what do they have to do? They have to gang up upon their father to get Benjamin, Yusuf's younger brother. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to us, and Joseph said to his servants, put their merchandise into their saddlebags so they might recognize it when they have gone back to their people, that perhaps they will return again. So when they returned to their fathers, they said, oh, our father, the measure has been denied to us. So send with us our brother that we may be given measure. Indeed, we will be his guardians. Now they go back to Yaqub alayhi salam. And they said, Baba, Dad, look, we need Benjamin to go back with us to Egypt. Because he wasn't with us, the king of Egypt didn't give us all the grains that we're supposed to get. Are they telling the truth so far? So far they are. Yes, he's ready. He knows what's going to happen. You know the 10 brothers of Yusuf. Now what does the father Yaqub say to them? He says, قال هل آمنكم عليه إلا كما آمنتكم على أخيه من قبل فالله خير حافظا وهو أرحم الراحمين. Should I entrust my young son Benjamin to you like I entrusted Yusuf to you? What's playing in the heart of Yaqub? He's scared. What's still in his heart? Yusuf alayhi salam. they say to him, وَلَمَّا فَتَحُوا مَتَاعَهُمْ وَجَدُوا بِضَاعَتُهُمْ رُدَّتْ إِلَيْهِمْ قَالُوا يَا أَبَانَا مَا نَبْغِي هَذِهِ بِضَاعَتُنَا رُدَّتْ إِلَيْنَا. They said when they opened their bags, they found the merchandise that they tried to bargain with Yusuf alayhi salam to get the grain. Guess what Yusuf did to the goods? He put it back in their bags. So not only did they get the grain, what else did they get? What they tried to sell. Right? They came to sell it to get grain. Yusuf alayhi salam gives them the grain, and he gives them their stuff back. And this is the way of the prophets of God. Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa ala alihi, whenever he was given good, he would always give better than it. The Prophet of God, whenever he was given good, he would always give better than it. Now Yusuf alayhi salam, they're trying to sell things. He takes what they give him, he gives them grain, but then he takes their stuff and puts it right back in their bags. Now what is this doing to the heart of the 10 brothers? It's causing their greed to increase. So like, not only did we get our grains, we got our bags. So what does this cause? It causes the resolve to take their younger son, the younger brother with them, even stronger. They're going to make sure that Yaqub alayhi salam gives them Benjamin. And look at what Yaqub says. He says, never will I send him with you until you give me a promise by Allah that you will bring him back to me, unless you should be overcome by enemies. And when they had given him their promise, he said, Allah, over what we say, is a witness. It takes a promise from them. That if I give you Benjamin, if I give you Benjamin, you have to promise me by Allah that you will bring him back to me. Now, if you were the father, if you were the Yaqub, would you give the youngest son to them? Honestly speaking, would you? No, you wouldn't, because you would have no trust for them. But this is a prophet of God, and what did Yaqub see very early on? He saw the dream of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. So he knew what the ultimate outcome was going to be. Even though he knew the ultimate outcome, he still had to go through the difficulties to get there. And he saw the giving of the youngest son as part of one of the steps of getting there. But he tries to appeal to their nafs al-ammara. He says, if I give him to you, promise me you'll bring him back. Do they make the promise? Yes. They do. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to say, قال يا بني لا تدخلوا من باب واحد وادخلوا من أبواب متفرقة وما أغني عنكم من الله من شيء إن الحكم إلا لله عليه توكلت وعليه فليتوكل المتوكلون. He tells them when you go back to Egypt, there's 10 brothers, now there's 11. He says, I want you to enter the city, but I want you to each go into different doors. Don't go through the same door. Why did he tell them this? Why? Allah goes on to say, and when they entered from where their father had ordered them, it did not avail them against Allah. It was just something within the soul of Yaqub which he satisfied. And indeed, he was a possessor of knowledge because of what we had taught him, but most people do not know. Yaqub alayhi salam was afraid of al-ayn. He was afraid of the evil eye. You had a group of 10 brothers who were handsome, nothing like Yusuf alayhi salam. But he was afraid that if they entered Egypt, that some evil eye would befall them, and because of that evil eye, something would happen to Benjamin. So he was trying to give them a spiritual prescription. Right? The Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa alihi, he told us in the hadith, al-aynu haqq. The evil eye is true. It's real. Imam Malik alayhi rahmatullah, when they used to enter his house, he had written on the door of his house, Ma sha'Allah, la quwwata illa billah. So anyone who entered the door of Imam Malik, they would read what? Ma sha'Allah, la quwwata illa billah. Then they would enter and see Imam Malik, because when you would see Imam Malik, you would have to get jealous because of the knowledge and the honor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him. So the evil eye never befell Imam Malik. But Imam Malik was a person of taqwa. So that spiritual prescription, it worked for Imam Malik. Did that spiritual prescription work for them? Why? They didn't have taqwa in their hearts. You know, the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa alihi, he taught us something. He taught us whoever says this 3 times in the morning, Bismillah alladhi la yadurru ma'a ismihi shay'un fil ardi wa la fis samai wa huwa as-sami'ul alim. By the name of God, the one with whose name no harm will befall me. He says, whoever says this 3 times in the morning, no harm will befall him until the evening. And he says, whoever says this 3 times in the evening, no harm will befall him until the morning. Now, if a heart of taqwa truly believes it, says this, then no harm will befall. But if somebody says it not from the heart, does it really count? So the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam enter from the door, the different doors. But Allah tells them tells us it did them no good. Because the taqwa was not in their hearts. وَلَمَّا دَخَلُوا عَلَى يُوسُفَ آوَى إِلَيْهِ أَخَاهُ قَالَ إِنِّي أَنَا أَخُوكَ فَلَا تَبْتَئِسْ بِمَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. So they give Yusuf alayhi salam Benjamin. Right away, what does Yusuf tell Benjamin? He says, I'm your brother. Benjamin's still a young boy. Yusuf alayhi salam is his full brother. Remember the other 10 are his half brothers. So he wants him to calm down and know that no harm is going to happen to him. Allah goes on to say, فَلَمَّا جَهَّزَهُمْ بِجَهَازِهِمْ جَعَلَ السِّقَايَةَ فِي رَحْلِ أَخِيهِ ثُمَّ أَذَّنَ مُؤَذِّنٌ أَيُّهَا الْعِيرُ إِنَّكُمْ لَسَارِقُونَ. So they come in, and you know the story that Yusuf alayhi salam, he had like a vessel, a cup that was his. He had one of his servants put it in Benjamin's bag. See what's happening right now? He had a vessel that he owned, he put it in the bag of Benjamin. And he had his servant call out, look, someone has stole something from us. We're missing this vessel of gold and silver. And they start looking around, and guess whose bag they find it in? Benjamin. You see the plan of Yusuf alayhi salam? They look around, and they find it in the bag of Benjamin. And they say, قَالُوا وَأَقْبَلُوا عَلَيْنَا مَاذَا تَفْقِدُونَ. They said while approaching them, what are you missing? They said, we are missing the measure of the king. And for he who produces it, the reward a camel's load, and I am responsible for it. They said, by Allah, you have certainly known that we did not come to cause corruption in the land, and we are not thieves. They're saying, we didn't steal anything. We came here in peace. They, the accusers, said that what should be the recompense if you should be liars? They said to Yusuf, they said to the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam, if you're lying, and we find the ownership of the king with you, what should happen? They said its recompense is that he whose bag it is found will be its recompense. They said that whoever's bag you find your stuff in, you keep him. He's yours. Guess whose bag they find it in? Yeah, said, find it in Benjamin's bag. And you see the 10 brothers are in a predicament now. They're in a predicament. Remember what they told their father? Remember the promise? And now what's happening? Very tough time for them. Now they find the stuff in Benjamin's bag. And they said, look what they said. قالوا إن يسرق فقد سرق أخ له من قبل. They said if he steals, he had a brother who used to be a thief. Who are they talking to? They don't know they're talking to Yusuf. And Yusuf alayhi salam is hearing this. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that Yusuf became angry, ولكن أصرها بنفسه. Kept it
show the anger. Now, if somebody calls you a liar to your face, you're going to get upset, aren't you? Of course. If somebody calls you a thief, if somebody calls you terrible things, you're going to get upset. Especially when you know it's not true. Now they're saying if he steals, he got it from his brother. He had a brother who was a thief. Now Yusuf alayhi salam keeps this in his heart. He doesn't show it to them, his anger. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. And Allah goes on to say, قَالَ أَنْتُمْ شَرٌّ مَكَانًا وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا تَصِفُونَ. You are worse in position and Allah is the most knowing of what you describe. قالوا يا أيها العزيز إن له أبا شيخ كبير فخذ أحدنا مكانه إن نراك من المحسنين. They say he's got an old father by the name of Jacob. Take one of us in his place and we'll see you as a person who does good. Yusuf alayhi salam doesn't agree to this. He says, I won't. He says, I'm only going to take the one who committed the act. Now Benjamin reminds you that he knows the whole time that Yusuf is his brother. So he's calm. He's going along with the plan. The other brothers have no idea what's going on. So what happens now? Rehan, what time do I have? 9:20? Can I have till 9:20? Can I have 7 minutes? He said, I seek refuge of Allah that we take except him whom we found our possession. Indeed, we would be then unjust. So when they had despaired of him, they secluded themselves in private consultation. The eldest of them said, do you not know that your father has taken upon you an oath by Allah before you failed in your duty to Joseph? So I will never leave this land until my father permits me or Allah decides for me. And he is the best of judges. ارجعوا إلى أبيكم فقولوا يا أبانا إن ابنك سرق وما شهدنا إلا بما علمنا وما كنا للغيب حافظين. Now the eldest brother starts to feel bad. Something's going on in his heart. Remember what happened to Zulaykha? Something happened in her heart that had changed her to tell the truth. Now the eldest brother is going through that same circumstance. He says, look guys, remember what we did to Yusuf? Years back, close to 25, 30 years back. Now Allah, his father, has taken an oath from us, and here we are doing the same thing. So he says, look, you guys go back and tell your father the truth. But what happens when they go to Yaqub and tell him the truth? If you're Yaqub, and you're hearing the story, what's your reaction going to be? Put yourself in his position. You took Yusuf alayhi salam from me. I didn't want to give him to you. You took his younger brother from me. 30 years later, I didn't want to give him to you. But you promised me by Allah you're going to bring him back. What's your reaction? This is a test. This is a trial. A human being has one missing son. Do you think that that father or mother would really sleep at night? Honestly speaking, as a father or a mother, if your son went missing, could you even sleep at night? Now you have two, and you know who the culprits are. They're standing in front of you. But what does Ya'qub say? He says, قَالَ بَلْ سَوَّلَتْ لَكُمْ أَنفُسُكُمْ أَمْرًا فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. Remember how he responded to the story of Yusuf? He's responding the same way. He said, this is something that you put forth. فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. What did we say sabrun jameel is? What is beautiful patience in reality? What did we say it was defined as? Who remembers? Complaining to Allah alone. Not complaining to his creation, but complaining to only Allah. Now Ya'qub alayhi salam, he turns and he says, it may be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring Yusuf, Benjamin, and all of his brothers back together. He has this hope in Allah. happens, and I want to stop here. The narrators, they say that the angel of death came to visit Yaqub at that time. And Yaqub alayhi salam, he says to the angel of death, "You've come to take my soul." The angel of death says, "No." He says, "Okay, you've come to take the soul of one of my children." The angel of death says, "No, I haven't. I just came to visit you." Yaqub alayhi salam, his loving father, he says, "Look," he says, "tell me, have you taken the soul of Yusuf?" See where his heart is? Where's his heart fixated on? Yusuf. And the angel of death says, "No." Happiness at that point starts to enter the heart of Yaqub. Now remember, Yaqub is going through trials and difficulties. Yusuf alayhi salam is going through trials and difficulties. And the same way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Jibreel to Yusuf alayhi salam in the well, Allah is now sending the angel of death, according to the narrators, to give Yaqub a light at the end of this tunnel. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does to the hearts that are connected to Him. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He connects all of our hearts to Him. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes our matters easy for us. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He does not test us the way that He tested Yusuf alayhi salam, but He clothes us with the clothing of Yusuf alayhi salam. My brothers and sisters, a beloved brother of ours, Ashuqullah, everyone who knows him here, his mother is very ill in San Diego. Let's make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives her shifa. Let's make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showers her with His rahmah. Ya Allah, whatever you have in store for her, Ya Allah, we do not ask you to reverse it, but we ask you that you put your rahmah upon her, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Ya Allah, make her of those who say La ilaha illallah in this dunya. Make her of those who say La ilaha illallah in the akhirah, Ya Rabbil Alameen. And make her and her children, Ya Rabbil Alameen, witnesses for her, Ya Rabbil Alameen, Yawm al-Qiyamah. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Our last session, inshallah, is next week. We will finish the story of Yusuf alayhi salam next week. And if we have any questions, we'll take them all next Wednesday. But one question that did come up, people were asking me about the names of Yusuf and his brothers. And they're asking me, these were Arabic names. They were not. They were not. They were from the names of Bani Israel. Yusuf alayhi salam was a prophet to whom? The children of Israel. Right? Bani Israel. So these are names from that region. Yusuf alayhi salam was not an Arab prophet. And so he was living at that time, like we said before, in Palestine. He comes to Egypt, and eventually he's back to Palestine. Because you know where he's buried. Yusuf alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ishaq alayhi salam, they're buried in Hebron. It's in Palestine. So we'll go over that inshallah at the end of next week's session. Salam.